Hello and welcome to Fire in the Belly. Today we have myself, Mighty Pete, and we're joined by Anna Cantwell. Good afternoon, or good morning, I
Hello,
should say.
hello. Yes, yes.
Tell us, where are you dialing in from today?
I am in Los Angeles, California. Not so sunny on this particular day, and nevertheless, happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, it's great to have you on. So tell us, Anna, who are you? What do you do?
I am a soul coach and a meditation teacher. For me, this was a long, long journey that I did not intend necessarily to set out on. And really, my goal is to support people in feeling their best, freeing their minds of whatever limitations, negative beliefs, subconscious traps might be holding them back. And of course, to help people feed their soul. To me, it's a really holistic perspective and just supporting people and living their greatest life, their fullest capacity.
Oh, okay. So a soul coach, give us the sort of the street side view of that. What is that in the simplest form?
Sure. A soul coach is kind of like a life coach
Mhm.
who links mind, body, and spirit. So, really, I focus on the connection and the intersection between how your mind influences your body, influences your spirit. For a long time, I focused on the body through yoga. Then I really got into the mind sphere with meditation when I realized that it takes a multi-pronged approach for everyone.
Well, I love it. I look forward to getting into that even more. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So tell us, what does fire in the belly mean to you then?
Mm, I love this phrase. I'm so drawn to fire as an element. Astrologically, I am a fire sign and have definitely been known to or known as having that passion, right? I know you said a lot of people say that fire in the belly means passion to them, but for me, I look at it a little bit differently, a little bit energetically and spiritually. I don't know if you're familiar with the chakra system. Chakras are energy centers throughout the body.
Okay.
They are there physiologically with bundles of nerve endings. And the chakra associated with the belly is called the Manipura chakra.
Okay.
And in Sanskrit, that means city of shining jewels. So the belly is associated with desire and will. So I really see fire in the belly as the desire, the will to really live and to live life fully. Another
Wow.
one of my abs, yeah,
I
yeah.
love that. I love it. Yeah.
Another, it's really powerful. It's called the solar plexus, is your
Okay.
third chakra. So it's also associated with the sun. And if you think about really our connection to the sun, daytime, the will to live, most of our life takes place when the sun is shining. The fire in the belly is it's a really important concept. It's the thing that gets us up and going every single day, you know, not just from survival, right? Not just from a surviving perspective, but really from a thriving perspective. Mhm.
Hmm. That's interesting that you have already separated that, the surviving and thriving.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's to me that's the greatest shift that we make in our journey, our healing journey or our growth journey.
Hmm. Cool. Well, take us right back, Anna. Where are you from originally then, and talk to us about your upbringing and your family and stuff.
Sure thing. I was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. I don't know if you're familiar. Has a lot of associations. Music City, USA, Country Music, USA. It's a really beautiful place, Nashville, and one of the things I'm most grateful for about growing up there is that it's very natural. I got to spend a lot of time outside. So Nashville's a pretty small city, and we lived, out not so far out in the country, in the suburbs, really. And we lived in this really beautiful little valley. So we had a beautiful creek in our backyard, a bunch of woods, and so much of my childhood was spent just running and playing out there. It really was absolutely my happy place. to be outside, to be creating. I'm the youngest of four, so definitely a full family, and that really was a huge gift to me. Of course, there's some struggles that come with being the youngest. You know, you get interrupted. Sometimes your voice, it seems like it doesn't matter as much because you're the youngest. And that was, talk about something that put a fire in my belly. I said, I will be heard. And, you know, when I was little, I really took to observing. I would observe my siblings. I would observe the mistakes they made. I would observe and really learn from them. And I think that taught me to also listen really well, which absolutely supports me in my work today. A lot of what I do is listen, and try to listen from a pure place of presence. You know, the funny thing about the way that I grew up, my parents are very religious. They're also very spiritual folks. They really live out what it is that they believe. And growing up in the church from such a spiritual background, I believe really supported me in many ways. There was a strong emphasis when I was growing up on love and service, really compassion. And that's something that today I absolutely live by. To me, I'm here on earth to serve, to spread love, to raise the consciousness of the planet. Now, I don't think I would have said it quite like that when I was growing up. I was, you know, I went to a Christian school. We went to church every Sunday, every Wednesday night, and it was very much woven into the fabric of our lives. And I did, from a very young age, begin teaching people about the Bible, instructing people, hosting small groups, really for self-inquiry and asking questions. And it wasn't until recently that I realized that this is what I still do today. I lead programs. We dive into self-inquiry. We ask the tough questions. We explore why we do what we do. And now it's just simply not from that lens necessarily. You know, of course, that perspective, just like any way of growing up, comes with its challenges too. I think that there was a lot of I think there was fear involved, there was guilt, there was shame, just generally surrounding the church. And that is motivating to some people. And what's really, really interesting, and to connect this piece, is that the third chakra, the solar plexus, while when it's in a balanced form, it manifests in strong willpower and strong desire. Its imbalanced form is guilt and shame. So when we experience guilt and shame, it really strips us of our willpower and of owning our desires, our passions, our ambitions. And the even more interesting thing about all of this is that from probably starting in middle school, I began to experience a lot of stomach pain. I started to get chronic stomach pain, and it was a really interesting thing. I started to notice that I was feeling really anxious, and because of how I was naturally, plus a little bit of the nurture, you know, we're all kind of a combination of the nature and nurture, that I was so stoic, and then I was such a people pleaser that I didn't want to speak up about it. I didn't want to speak up about the kind of crippling anxiety that I was feeling, the pressure to be good, right? The pressure to perform, the pressure to really be perfect. And so it was kind of the perfect storm of the societal and cultural pressures of where I grew up, a little bit of self-inflicted pressure for sure. And soon enough, I was really grappling with an eating disorder that got to a pretty dangerous level, lost a lot of weight that to me was really rooted in the core belief I'm not good enough. And the wild thing is, to me, this is the most common core limiting belief that we all really grapple with, and that keeps us, that inhibits us from reaching our full capacity, our full potential. So at that time, I have to say I'm so incredibly grateful for my mother. She noticed what was going on, that I wasn't eating, or that I was passing it off as eating healthy, which is really interesting. Became very obsessed with health magazines and fitness magazines, and I would pore over them all the time as like a 14-year-old girl. And I was very, very bright, very interested in learning, always very curious, always very studious. And I realized one day that, oh my goodness, all I am thinking about is food. That's all I'm thinking about. How I can eat less, how I can, really underlying thought, subconscious thought, how can I be more perfect, right? How can I perfect myself? And my mom, I remember this day very vividly. She said, Anna, we're going to the therapist, and you really don't have a choice in this. And I was so upset. I was so upset. I don't have a problem. There's nothing wrong. You look in the mirror, there's something wrong. And I'm really grateful for that day that, my mom just took me to an amazing woman, my first therapist ever. She was also a dietitian. And she taught me something that I still use today with my clients, and I'd love to share it. It's
Please
really
do.
simple. Yeah, it's a really simple concept that essentially is within us, all of us, we have two channels. We have a lies channel, and there's a truth channel. We all have this naturally. And a lot of the time, our lies channel is volume is cranked way up. And if you've been hearing this lies channel for a long time, I was hearing the lies channel, you have to be thin in order to be loved. You're not good enough as you are. Don't, this is fine, right? Everything is fine that you're doing. You're not really hurting yourself. When that volume is turned up so loudly, it becomes really difficult to distinguish the truth channel, and that it takes a really conscious effort to say, I hear that. And those are lies. And this little voice over here, it's really soft, but I can start to hear it, and that's the truth. And the truth is that naturally, we are all enough. We're completely whole. We're never not whole and complete. Of course, we grow. Of course, we change. That's also part of who we are. And we are always enough. We're always more than enough. And that truth channel, it took some real tuning into. It took some time to learn to recognize it and to differentiate it from the lies channel. And that was a lot of my work in this therapy, coupled with very practical things like tracking everything that I was eating and realizing that I was absolutely eating nowhere enough nourishment just to simply sustain myself. And it's so interesting to me that this is all it's very tied to my physical belly. It was this, I was basically starving myself at this point. And that woman, it was so integral to my growth and journey to be able to work with her, to be able to feel comfortable with her, and just to go through that experience of really facing that particular demon head on. I think it's one of the most important things that we can do is to really dive into the depths of whatever it is that we're grappling with, especially with a trained professional, especially with someone who has maybe been through that particular challenge before, as she had.
Out of
Mm.
interest, do you know how that was serving you at the time? That
Can
behavior?
you ask? Oh, how it was serving me.
Hmm.
Oh, I see what you mean. It it gave me a sense of control. I
Okay.
think my anxiety made a lot of things seem out of my control. So I thought, what's the one thing I can control? Every little bit of food that I consume, and I think it's really pervasive in our culture, the just constant reminder to lose weight, diet culture, uh, every looking at photoshopped images, I know was very directly harmful to me, because you see this picture, right, this airbrush picture, and you compare it to what's in the mirror, and of course it doesn't look the same, right? And as though those are the standards, right, of what is beautiful or what is desirable.
That's interesting. So it was the insecurity or the that side of it that was really fueling it, but the control
Mhm.
came back through limiting your food intake essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
And that was really my first kind of battle. That was my first major challenge. And when I made it through that, I started to see my own inner strength. Started to see, Anna, you're really strong and you're really resilient, and you have a very powerful mind. You have a really, really strong mind. So wield it carefully, and really honor it. And after that, it wasn't totally related, but the stomach pain continued, and I bounced around to doctor after doctor after doctor, specialists, you know, GI docs. I got an endoscopy. Kept saying nothing's, we don't really know what's wrong. Nothing's wrong. I think you have acid reflux or something like that. I think you have these kinds of things. Here, try this. Take some, basically take some Pepsid, take some Pepto Bismol, things like that. And I'm adamant in knowing this is not that. This kind of gripping stomach pain is not that. So my mom, having a background in psychology, she recommended again that I go to a therapist for dealing with stress. I remember this is my junior year of high school, and it's it's a big year. You're getting ready for college. I was a very high performing student, and mind you, at this time in my life, I've always been attuned to joy. I've always been an optimistic person, seeing the glass half full. I It's not like during this time I was incredibly unhappy or anything. But my body was giving me some strong signals that something was not right. So I began to see another therapist for whatever this funny link between my stress and my stomach hurting was. And through that work, I really came to learn some much more productive ways of dealing with stress and anxiety, as well as some incredibly helpful information. One fact, which is that our stomach actually has more neurotransmitters than our brain does. And to me, anyone that grapples with any kind of stomach issue, this is a sort of gut brain connection issue. So what was happening was I was experiencing anxiety, which was causing my stomach to hurt. The neurotransmitters in my stomach are saying, "Oh, we don't like this." They're tensing up, they're gripping, and that was this pain that I struggled really to describe to people how it felt. And it was near constant. It was pretty much constantly in pain. And that was sending a signal to the neurotransmitters in my brain saying, "Oh, your stomach hurts. Oh, this is awful." And then just creating this terrible feedback loop, right? Of worry here, pain here, worry more. And it left me, really, really struggling. It was absolutely tough to think, wow, I'm 15, 16 years old, and to have doctors look you in the eye and say, you have chronic pain. You're going to be in pain for the rest of your life. It's and that it really pissed me off. It's not something that I didn't want to just accept it. I felt that I knew something in me, which I would now describe as my intuition, which is also having to do with your gut, that something in me really, really knew there's something to do about this. And it's not complicated, and it's not taking any particular medication, and it's going to be within you that will rise up, and you won't be in pain for the rest of your life. Now, it wasn't until a few years later that I really began to kind of unwind this. Yeah. When I was in college, I went to college in North Carolina, and there was another tough time. It was a lot of hmm, I experienced some acute and significant trauma there as well. And that kind of doubled down. It doubled down on the anxiety and the fear, which of course didn't help the stomach. And I started therapy, was seeking therapy. I also at this time began doing yoga. I had done some yoga before, and noticed that this just it really relaxes me. My brain that is kind of this like washing machine of thoughts all the time, it really seems to settle when I'm in yoga. And what is this about? So as I started to take yoga a little bit more, I began to see just glimpses of how it could be, how my mind could be settled, how I could experience calm in my physical body, calm in my mind. And the definition of yoga is really to yoke, and that yoga yokes together the mind, the body, and the spirit. And really prior to that, I felt misaligned, right? That I was missing out on that particular alignment. So I started to take a little bit more yoga. I was really getting into it at this time in college, and it always really helped me when I felt upset to, go to Zumba class or go on a run. Getting in my body really helped me with this. And the stomach pain, it kept going on for a little while. The traumatic experiences that I had at that time, I had an opportunity to stand up for myself. And while that was also a re-traumatizing experience, I am so, so, so thankful that I did. And surrounding all of that, it left me feeling depressed. I thought, this is not what I thought that college was going to be. This is not what I thought the next kind of phase of my life was going to be. And at the same time, I had some really positive outlets. I started coaching at this time, and that's one of the things that I'm most grateful for. I had some really, really incredible mentors that just absolutely poured into me, that saw the potential that I had, that saw that I was a really natural teacher and guide. And I began to learn the lens of how to really coach someone through something and not just kind of give it away, right? Or not just share information, but really get them to see or reflect to them how to solve whatever they were dealing with, whether that was in their dissertation or in their kind of academic goals. So it was a lot around kind of goal coaching and then also coaching people through writing. I was an English major. I focused on education. I ran a program for local youth that got them into writing to start to share their stories. And it was really in this process that I saw, wow, I can take all this stuff that I've been through and I can share it too. I can use my story to inspire other people. I can use my skill set to help other people see the natural light that shines within them. And I think it was right around this time that I really found kind of my mantra, which is a beautiful, beautiful quote from Dr. Maya Angelou that is, nothing can dim the light that shines from within. And this was my guiding phrase. And as I completed college, as I kind of wrapped everything up, I made the decision to leave the difficult things that happened there and say, the past is the past. If I want to really live my life and live it fully, then what I have to do is I have to leave those things behind. And I don't think I would have been able to do that if I hadn't had the opportunity to kind of say my piece and really to try to seek justice for the things that had happened. And as I discovered, our justice system is not always in the favor of someone that has a traumatic experience.
Mm.
And I'm just happy that I got the opportunity to go through that. And it showed me more powerfully than any other experience in my life, you can do anything. You can do anything. Anything you put your mind to. If you could do that, you can do anything. And with that, I moved to Houston, Texas, because there was a grad program there that I really wanted to do. And it allowed me to be a full-time school teacher while also in a master's program at the same time. I was teaching high school English in Northeast Houston at a charter school, and it was another great challenge to be studying this, first time totally on my own outside of school in a new city, in a huge city. And it was at this time that I had to lean really on yoga more than anything. I would have my students at school, I would say, if I seem stressed, I need you to ask me if I've been to yoga class. And if the answer is no, you tell me that day to go to yoga. They were really great about it. And, I think many school teachers would say that it's never the kids that's the toughest part about teaching school. The kids are amazing. It's the adults, the politics around it, the system, the very broken system, the lack of resources. There's a lot of intense obstacles to doing your job well. And I quickly began to see that you cannot pour from a cup that is empty. You can't. You can't give someone something that you haven't discovered for yourself. And what I hadn't discovered for myself was inner peace, truly. And I do believe that ultimately the thing that I offered my students, my school students, was positivity, a warm smile to walk into. Maybe they learned something about about language and words. Maybe they learned some new vocabulary, but most of it were the conversations after school, helping them, work through the tough stuff in their life, because these kids, they're an underserved population and are dealing with so much more than school. And it was really at that time that I had to lean so much on my kind of self-care, but I really had no energy. You're working 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. usually. When you get home, it's grading, lesson planning. So you're basically working all the time. And it left me, I had no social life. I had really no creative energy. And I just began to take a good hard look in the mirror and say, is this really the life that you're choosing? Is this your highest contribution to the world? And when I felt like the answer was no, I had to think a lot about what I really wanted. And the one thing that really was stoking my internal fire was these yoga challenges. I was doing these programs at my yoga studio, a really beautiful community in Houston, Big Power Yoga. And they had these challenges called the 40 Days Journey into Power. And power is really the other word that's associated with the solar plexus. It's like taking up your personal power, your willpower. And these challenges were really about getting consistent with your yoga practice. You'd practice 5 to 6 times a week. You would also start to meditate. And this is when I first began meditating. And boy, was I the world's worst meditator when I started. I swear to you, I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. I couldn't. I would be fidgeting. I would just want to stretch. And that's what really highlighted to me, wow, you have a long way to go with your mind. That, sure, yoga class, it helps you be present. It was pretty much the only time of the day when I was not thinking about, okay, is Gerardo going home tonight and gonna have enough food? Or is Ruby gonna be able to have a ride to her job after school? Just thinking about my kids. And it was really constant. And that kind of 1 hour window at yoga class was the only time when my mind began to settle. And I think that yoga really bridged the gap for mindfulness and present moment awareness for me. And when I opened up to the present moment, or when I started to, I felt, wow, the stress that I'm experiencing all the time is here. It's in my mind. It's dwelling on the past, or it's projecting into the future. When I look at what's happening right now, in this precise moment, nothing's wrong. Everything is okay. And this is when really my chronic pain started to go away. I noticed that all of a sudden, wow, my stomach's not hurting as much from doing this. And, at the time, it was also something that really, really helped. I was taking a ton of ibuprofen. A, because I was stressed. B, because of my cycle being in a lot of pain on my cycle, which is also exacerbated by inflammation and stress. And it was tearing apart my stomach lining. I was taking, four every 4 hours for a week, right, out of the month. So an insane amount of something that might seem innocuous if it's one here and one there, but when you're taking that much, I could tell it was having a really significant impact on my gut. So I stopped taking that, and I started to use other methods to manage my pain, including essential oils, including yoga, including cannabis. And all of those methods, like I said earlier, a multi-pronged approach, plus breathing, plus meditation, really, it just dissolved my chronic pain. And then it was like one day I kind of woke up and it just, my stomach never hurt anymore, hardly ever. And that was when it really clicked, when I really start to see clearly the power of the mind body connection. It's that really, that's most of what causes disease or dis-ease, right? Illness. And when I was free of that illness, I began to say, well, I know what I don't want. So let me move really boldly and powerfully in the direction of what it is that I do want, which is wellness, which is not just scraping by, but really thriving. So I made a decision. I can remember this moment so clearly. And it was a part of these yoga challenges. And we had a weekly meeting every week. We would have kind of personal inquiry questions and to think about what is it that you really desire? How are you reaching your goals? It brought me back to my coaching background. And I felt like, wow, I want to move to California. I've always wanted to move to California. And I think something in me is telling me that's the next right step. It also had me get present to, I want to get my yoga teacher training. I thought this is something so valuable. And if I could help other people to tap into this incredibly simple and incredibly impactful practice, what a gift. So I think it was my 6th challenge that I had completed, these like 40-day challenges. And people in our meetings, there would be, 75 to 100 people in these meetings, and people would stand up and they would share their epiphanies. And it was really wonderful to have that support and accountability. It's another crucial piece of the puzzle. And something came over me and I stood up in the middle of the room and I said, I am moving to LA. And I'm kind of looking around like, who just said that? Me. My friends and my fellow yogis are looking at me saying, you're moving to LA? And I said, I am indeed. I decided that right now. And it was such a pivotal moment for me because I decided. And when you look at the root of the word decide, the DEC means to cut. So it's like I had just made this incision, decided so clearly, this is what I'm going to do. I have no clue how it's going to come about, and that's okay. Everything is figure outable. So at that time, I had a connection at the school that I was teaching at. There was a woman who she actually taught yoga to kids all day. And I thought, that is the coolest thing. And she reached out to me and mentioned that she knew this husband and wife that had a yoga inspired coaching company, that they did yoga teacher trainings, and that I should just link up with them. And boy, am I so glad that she did. She linked me with these folks, Dan and Christina, and I met up with them in the next couple of weeks. I went to one of their workshops and I just felt like, wow, whatever it is that these two are doing, I need to be a part of. They were so happy. They were so aligned. They were entrepreneurs. They had a nonprofit that trained basically school teachers and social workers to become yoga teachers so they could incorporate mindfulness and yogic principles in their practice. And I just thought, that is the coolest thing. And they were magnetic people. You see those examples of someone and think, yeah, that's what I'm about. So I took their yoga teacher training that summer, and it was absolutely the most transformative experience of my life. It got me present to the stories that I had been telling myself, the lies channel, right? That had still been running. And we read a book called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and it's one of the simplest and most beautiful texts to awaken to personal responsibility, and that it's not my fault. Anything that has occurred to me in my life, no one's trauma is their fault. And it is everyone's personal responsibility to take up ownership of their own healing process and to move forward. And that experience, it got me into my voice. I had been teaching already, and turns out teaching yoga is way easier than teaching a room of 35 18-year-olds when you're 23. So that it was another experience that got me present to my own personal power, and a gift that I had for teaching and for offering understanding and for being patient and for listening. And that experience, I was like, this is what I want to do. This is the thing. So the day after I graduated my yoga teacher training, I moved to LA. I packed up all my stuff. I took a nice little road trip out here. I stopped in some magical places, one of them being Sedona, Arizona, which is just so beautiful, and began to really see a vision from my life. And Dan and Christina, I said, I want to work with you all. I want to do what you're doing. Their company is called Mind Tribes. And really, since that day that I moved out to LA, we would have a coaching call every weekend. They just began to mentor me, to teach me a lot of their techniques, their tools, their lenses and approaches. And it was the guidance and transformation that I needed. Of course, along the way, it was a few months before this that I started to learn about things like the law of attraction that I had never heard of before. And the synchronicities begin to line up like so magically, so with so much velocity, that I thought, we're really onto something here. And I think the biggest mental shift that I made is, to me, there's two kinds of people who think the world is against me, and my life is a fight, and things are not working out for me. And the other kind is people who think, ultimately everything that goes on, it's working for the highest good. Things are working out for me, even if I can't see exactly how that might be right now. And oh man, it feels like a rest is history moment. From the second I moved to LA, so many pieces lined up. Before I knew it, I was, a brand new yoga teacher teaching at several studios. That linked me to my meditation teacher training. I started working privately with clients and working one-on-one, and before I knew it, I had a business going and was totally supporting myself. And it, of course, takes time, like all things do. And I grew it bit by bit, but it was like all of a sudden I looked up and said, oh my goodness, Anna, you have created the life of your dreams. You have a flexible schedule that you get to choose what you do and when you do it. you get to be of massive contribution working with people that struggled with the same things that you did: anxiety, trauma, depression, and really just open their eyes that they are their own hero, that they're their own healer, that there are several really simple daily practices that we can do to make sure that we're headed in a path that we actually want to be going, and to choose our best life, to choose to intentionally create that for ourselves. And that's really what I do. That's how I got here.
Wow, that's a phenomenal journey. So
Mm.
what age were you when you moved to LA out of interest?
I was 24.
Wow.
Hmm. And I had a lot of stories about that too, that from being the youngest, you're too young to do this. One of my very first private clients was a woman who was a yoga student of mine. She really wanted to learn more about meditation, and she was 65. And she would always call me her young sage. And it got me present to the idea that really our paths are so unique that age means really nothing. It doesn't mean much at all. And there are people who are maybe in their 50s, their 60s, their 70s that maybe have never considered how they got where they did, or intentionally creating their life. And then there are people who are very young who are seemingly just quite enlightened and awakened. And that to say, well, I'm this age, so I can't do this, or it's too late, or it's too soon, is just a bunch of malarkey.
Out of interest, would you call yourself, sort of enlightened and awakened?
I hesitate to use those words, and I'll put this in terms of chakras. So the third eye, probably you hear a lot about the third eye when it comes to enlightenment and an awakening. I believe that I came into the world with my third eye open, meaning that I was always very intuitive, but the thing that caused me the most pain was ignoring and pushing away my intuition at the behest of my logical and analytical mind. And that spiritual connection and seeing spirit in everything, that was always there. Of course, it got nurtured when I was young, and to me, it got restricted with dogma and with rules and the church and religion, right? And um, as I grew, I began to see, wow, we're all using kind of different language for this, but we kind of mean the same thing, don't we? So, would I call myself an enlightened or awakened person? I would say that I am an aware being. I would say that enlightenment is the process of lightening up, and boy, have I lightened up. I would say I'm a very naturally and practiced intuitive individual as well. I've spent a lot of time working with my own intuition and attuning my own internal guidance system. And I'm also ever curious. I think I'm a pretty old soul. I think anybody that knows me would say that Anna's an old soul and that her age does not really reflect the full picture.
Out of interest, do you have any idea on that in terms of previous happenings?
Yes, we're getting into past lives. This is great. I'm
Hmm.
gonna need a sip for this. You know, I have had some visions of past lives. I have one. These typically come in a meditative state. And as I've grown in my practice, my daily practice is an hour of meditation a day. So it's something that it's really the most important thing to me. And having been on deeper dives, retreats, staying in the consistent daily practice and the kind of immersive experiences as well, I have had the opportunity, and I am a very open person spiritually. So one of my past life visions that's come out before is it's really interesting, um, being some kind of a queen in an ancient culture, and on my deathbed, basically being sent out into the water and having my deathbed lit on fire and being sent into the water. So that's a very vivid vision, very visceral feeling that has come up several times. Another one is an experience that's I had just a really strong flash of it just a few days ago, but being a little girl in some kind of Native American tribe and being with basically the elders of the tribe around this massive fire and dancing. And to me, that it makes perfect sense. That experience that I would have that in a past life.
Fire in the Belly is right up your street, really, isn't it?
I know.
Wow,
Yeah, lots of fire.
that's
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
Mm.
It's really interesting, the significance, and as you say, you've an old soul. Um, but it's interesting the links back to certain key things. Do any of those relate back, or does it make any correlation to your stomach pains? Did you ever come across anything in that way?
In my past lives,
Hmm. Yeah.
that's that's a great question. I think you might be causing an epiphany for me as we speak. Um, I feel strongly that the connection, for example, with being some kind of queen or a leader, and the connection to power.
Hmm.
Um, Definitely, it might have been, I may have been someone who was, how do I say, kind of like gluttonous on power. I don't know. It seemed the send off seemed loving, and it's also that's one of those things that I think I'll just have to explore more. And as for the little girl dancing around the fire, I've had bits and flashes that she died early, that she was really young when she died. And that's whether that had to do with her stomach, perhaps, eating something, right?
Hmm.
Having something there. So I really love that question. And I honestly don't know. I think it's something that I'll have to do a little more exploring into. What I will say is that what I know of my many different modalities, astrology, human design, life path, all of these things, my kind of power center is the solar plexus, is the third chakra. So that aligns for a lot of things that are just associated with my birthday and time.
Well,
Yeah.
so it's actually, I mean, almost the nerve endings, whether it be a sensitivity, it's a place of vulnerability, but also high sensitivity. So it's,
Yes.
wow.
Absolutely. And, I think for a lot of people, especially a lot of Americans, there's a huge, really epidemic of stomach pain, of all kinds of stomach issues. And of course, that can have a lot of, who's to say what the particular cause or correlations are there? right? There's one aspect that I'm sure is diet and food, and to me there's another aspect which is really across the board, shame. Lots of shame about, um, I mean, many many things. I think it's a very common experience that there's this shame around being vulnerable, there's a shame around being authentic, and that, you know, we all have our walls, right? And that we think if we just strive a little bit harder, if we just work a little bit harder, then we can kind of push through it without actually seeing what's underneath that.
Mm.
Is there something that I'm trying to make up for with this effort, right?
It was interesting because you talked about the term at the start, you know, and saying I think it was in your when you're 14ish that you were a people pleaser.
Yes.
Do you know why?
That, to me, many factors go into me being a people pleaser as I was young. I think that one part of it is kind of the gender role and the influence of being a young female, and thinking it's my job to kind of make sure that everyone's happy, right? There's a little bit of a biological sense there. And,
Can you
you know,
explain that a bit more? I'm not quite following you.
yeah, absolutely. You think just biologically, right? A mother, she's taking care of the kids. I'm thinking like way ancient, right? So without any kind of modern stereotypes or roles, mother, that's why women are tend to be better at multitasking. She's saying, okay, I have to kind of look at the perimeter of our home. I have to make sure this kid's getting fed, and when does this kid needs to go do this. And so just kind of keeping everything under wraps, right? Caring, constantly caring. And I think that part of that nurturing energy or that caring essence can cause issues when it becomes my responsibility to make everyone around me happy. And that's what I found. I think it was mutually reinforced. So I was reinforced, especially kind of religiously. You get the story of kind of the good girl. Be a good girl, be a good boy, right? Do what you're told. And I said, okay, yes. All right, I can make people around me happy if I follow these certain rules. And I think that it guided me for a long time. And it's a very tricky thing because it it can come across as a great thing, right? Oh, that's wonderful, you like to make the people around you happy. Well, that's all fine and good until you start really carrying the burden of other people being happy on your shoulders, and also not really questioning for yourself, am I happy? Is something that I'm doing to please another person causing harm to myself? And I think that was the big revelation for me, was that I realized the only way you can make everyone happy is if you lie to people, and that probably still won't do it. And no one else's happiness is your responsibility. That's theirs. I think one of my greatest influences and favorite thought leaders, her name is Byron Katie. And she says there's three kinds of business in the world. There's my business, there's other people's business, and there's God's business. And there's only one that's my responsibility, and that's my business. And that really, really helped me understand that it doesn't, that people pleasing doesn't really serve anyone. Mhm.
I was just curious, was there a link between teaching and this sort of the people pleasing part?
Hmm, that's also a great question. I think I had a natural sense of kind of justice. So from a very young age, I remember even as an elementary school child, teachers asking me to basically go with troublesome kids, quote, troublesome kids, kids that were acting up or that maybe didn't quite get the
Mm,
lesson we were learning. And they would just say, Anna, I want you to go in the hallway and I want you to teach this kid what we just learned.
mm,
And doing that from a very young age, I felt it was kind of my responsibility to do that because I did understand very quickly. And I did have the level of patience that was required to work with kids that adults just said, oh, this is too much. And I think, you know, I just really cared a lot that every kid got a chance to feel like, okay, I matter in this classroom as a student. And I think that definitely translated to me being a teacher. I think another influence on that was my parents. They had a nonprofit that worked with East African refugees, and they would take me to work with them, whatever these families needed as they were resettling to Nashville, whether that was teaching them English or taking them to doctor's appointments or job interviews or all that goes into settling as a refugee into a totally new country and culture. And I would teach them. So I was definitely brought up with the sense that when you have something to give, you give it. If you have more privilege, use that. If you have, if you can serve in any way that you can, serve.
that's awesome. Yeah, it's.
Mm.
I was very intrigued by your lies channel and your truth channel, and I was curious. I
Yes.
mean, is and you talked about the lies being a very volume up, loud thing, and one thing I was sort of wondering is is that almost like an empty vessel thing? Empty vessels making more noise. But before that, I was curious to know. I mean, is it something? Are they born at equal volume? And is this a version of nature and nurture?
That's a really wonderful inquiry. I think that when we are born, I would say truth channel is all the way up. You think about babies and children and how connected and how present and intuitive they are. They aren't thinking, oh man, last week when I stepped my toe, or you never see a baby get frustrated at when they are learning to walk and they fall down 50 or 100 times, right? To me, it's a small child. They would never look at their body and say, I don't like the way my hips look, or my nose is too big. They would never say that. So I think really Truth Channel is all the way up. Of course, we have the accessibility to the Lies channel. And then I think that, our parents' unhealed wounds can also get passed down through DNA to us, so that's an influence. And then I think, as early as a couple of years old, we start to get a lot of other influences, whether that's advertising, TV, school, religion, all different kinds of influences that begin to shape our very, very malleable and very neuroplastic minds. And it's really that kind of blueprint, I think, that cranks up the Lies channel, and it's repetition. It's what do we hear? Do we hear all the time, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, right? Or do we hear, I think of that beautiful book and movie, The Help. You is kind, you is smart, you is important. That kind of thing. Are we hearing positive messages about ourselves? Are we hearing empowering messages about ourselves to really balance out the strong messages that we get not just on airwaves and radio waves and television and school instruction, but also just from the collective consciousness, right? That our consciousness is not encapsulated in our physical brain or our body, but it's also outside of ourselves.
Mm.
I love this quote that says, it's like the body is a very tiny fence around a little part of a complete and whole and expansive idea.
Well, just out of interest, I mean, for anyone that's not aware, I mean, what's your definition of collective consciousness?
Absolutely. It's always good to define these things. Yes. To me, the consciousness is right. It's the isness. It's the idea that we are here and that there's something to say, I am here. And you could say that it's consciousness is energy. You could say consciousness is prana or chi or ki. Is another kind of term for it, all that is. And collective consciousness is simply the total sum of all of our consciousnesses together.
Wow.
So it's the combination of, and that's what, that's how the world is manifest. We all collectively co-create this along with the universe, God, source, whatever term you like to use.
Wow. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. Just
Of
out of
course.
curiosity, what, as a, I don't know, say a 7-year-old, what would we have seen if we had met you at 7?
Very similar to right now. My inner child is alive and well, she's very pleased with all of this that's occurring. At 7, I would have been outside behind a tree, creating stories, talking to animals, picking blueberries, just connected, lively, active, always running around, curious. I have a really strong connection to animals and always have. And I think it was when I was 7 that I was at the kitchen table. We had a big bay window there, and a little hummingbird just smack into the window, falls to the ground dead. And I'm just like, not on my watch. So I run outside. I see this little hummingbird lying there lifeless, and something in me does just says, take your index finger and press on its chest and give it little hummingbird CPR. And not 20 seconds later, zoop, buzzes, flies away. So that's what I was doing when I was 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because then, I mean, the picture you've painted then, sort of in your teen years, especially, 14, and it's really, there's a dramatic change. And I'm just curious about all the triggers and you talk anxiety. I think it seemed to be the key one, if I've understood correctly.
Yeah, I think that part of it was just the natural loss of innocence as a child.
Mm.
I think that another aspect was a message that I derived from the church teachings that I was receiving, which is that you come into this world broken, that there's something wrong with you.
Mm.
And that, coupled with God's always watching, that it, to me, that can cause a lot of paranoia. And then I think that there was also a little something in me. I was feeling a lot of that pressure. I think 7, 8, 9 was when I really started to realize that kind of people pleasing that started to manifest strongly in me, and I felt the pressure to be responsible. This is a really specific story, and I think everyone has a story like this. A teacher said something to you and it just stuck. It stuck like glue, and you can remember where you were sitting in the classroom. And as a teacher myself, I shudder to think whatever that was that I did for other people. Hopefully it was positive. I tried really hard, but like I said, at the time I was very stressed and going through my own thing, right? And that we're all human, of course, right? We can never be expected to be, quote, perfect, whatever that means. But at this time, I had a teacher, funny link, whose nickname for me was perfect. And that because I would never get a question wrong, because I was very studious, because I loved learning, but I didn't love learning so much that I wanted to make sure I was always right. And that experience of being in front of the class, being called this name, and having, if I missed a question, my identity crumbles, right? A whole room of kids, erupting into laughter if I miss one question creates a lot of pressure. And I think that was really where it started. I think I also have always had a really strong and active mind, which is that can, I think, with the right ingredients, manifest in really bad anxiety, or it can manifest in a lot of success in academics, which I had both. Right? I had a lot of success in school. I was straight A's, and I also deeply felt the anxiety and the impacts of, I have to get this right. If I don't, I'm the smart person. And that was like shedding that part of my identity, the ego that said you have to be the person that gets things right. I mean, that I've totally transformed in my life, which is now I'm like, what do I know? Like, I'm here on your podcast just sharing my story. I'm just sharing my experiences, and it seems like some of the things that I've experienced and some of the tools that other people have been kind enough to share with me and mentor me through also seem to really help a lot of people with what they're going through. So I think it's really the journey, as inverse as it might seem to the beginner's mind, that supported me, and kind of shedding that story of needing to be right, needing to be the smartest person in the room. Also, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're doing something wrong. You gotta elevate the folks around you and your community to learn.
Was your family and siblings, were you competitive at all, or where did that sort of desire come from?
My parents are very intelligent and highly educated as well. They both basically went to, all but their dissertation. Basically, they were very studious. They encouraged us in school. There wasn't an undue amount of pressure from them. I experienced more so my internal pressure. I'm very intrinsically motivated, or have an internal locus of control. So I thought, if I can do the best, I want to do the best. But with my siblings, there was not a competitive nature between us. I think my oldest sister, she really excelled in school as well. And I think that each of us kind of vary in where we get our motivation from. And I was really motivated by school, and I worked hard.
That's great, because I mean, it sort of was an environment that you wanted to learn, and as you said, it wasn't necessarily about the winning, but the learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, curiosity, I've always been present to my level of curiosity. I mean, I could, and I will, and I am spending the rest of my lifetime learning what could be better to me. And it's, I think, something that is really helpful for people that I would love to offer is that if you're experiencing some kind of fear around something, see if you can shift it into curiosity. and let it, instead of a fear of the unknown, be curious. What might be possible if I really leaned into this aspect of my life? Or I'm so curious, why does it feel difficult for me to play an instrument, or difficult for me to speak in front of large groups of people, or whatever particular challenge or fear might be present? And get curious about, where does that come from, and is that the lies channel, is that the truth channel speaking, that I'm naturally not good at something or not inclined to something. I think that is just a helpful perspective to carry us through life, to take on that curious beginner's mind, always wanting to learn, you know.
Yeah, I was curious. Out of interest, I mean, where do you see the ego sitting in regard to the truth and the lies channel?
Mm. Ego is lies channel all the way. Ego says you are separate from this. And when we see that we are all inextricably connected, which is the truth channel, or love, oneness, why would we ever hurt someone? Because it's hurting ourselves or the entire body, right? The collective consciousness. Um, I think that ego is very tricky. Ego loves to just be the little, Iago whispering in your ear, and just trying to remind you, compare yourself, compare your journey to someone else. To say, are you sure you wanna go out on a limb and do that? You should probably just stay right here where it's safe. We've been keeping you safe, because that's the ego's job as well, right? And not risk really loving or really living fully. I think the ego is another great way to term the lies channel. Absolutely.
I'm curious. I don't know why it's come into my head, but just whenever you're, as you say, you're living openly in terms of, one collective consciousness. I mean, but in terms then when it comes to a business and personal, I suppose personal wealth and personal success and things like that, how do you marry the two together? Because I mean, some says, almost kind of don't be greedy, but the other part says, well, with business, you have to provide, but also to grow it, and then the more you grow, the more you can help. How do you marry the two?
Yeah, I think what you just said, the more you grow, the more you can help. I see that it's coming from an abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset.
Hmm.
And that the ego says there's not enough to go around, so you have to get your own. You have to get your piece of the pie, which is a flawed perspective, because we're not pulling from a single pie. We're quote pulling from infinite consciousness and ever expansion. The universe on the whole, our entire galaxies upon galaxies upon galaxies, is expanding at a rate 3 to 5 times faster than any scientist ever thought. So to me, when you consider that and you shift away from, I have to secure the bag, right, to get my own, you don't see it as, my abundance doesn't take away from anyone. And really, what is it that what is the food of what is the food of life, the soul food? To me, it's spiritual growth, it's love and connection, and that no real dollar amount could ever, you could never put a price on that. I do think that, of course, that I see as I become more abundant, which could be financially, which could also be in love and connection, and abundant in creativity and knowledge and skills, right? I think we tend to limit abundance to just like money, but it's so many other things that it only provides increase for those that I serve. And I think when you serve something that's really of soul level value, that you should be compensated. And that to see people, one of the things that I love is seeing people decide to invest in themselves and say, the most worthy investment is my own growth and development so that I can offer my highest contribution to the whole. Really. I see, that's one of my favorite metaphors to kind of explain this is really, let's say someone is at the bottom of the well, right? They're going through a really tough time. They're in a really dark space, and it might feel like helping to say, well, I'm going to come and climb down in the bottom of the well with you. And I'm just going to sit at the bottom of the well. Well, what do we have now? We have two people at the bottom of the well, right? So my aim is I'm going to not climb into the bottom of the well with you. I'm going to do everything I can to prioritize my well-being because that's my business. My not my like my LLC, my responsibility. And from that space, I can authentically give and serve. And I think that, if we lived in a world where there wasn't rent and bills and all of these things, I would love to do this anyways. I would love for this to be my life. And I the impact that I desire to create in the world is a massive one. And to me, it's only a better thing to have people who are spiritually centered and inclined, who are authentic and who are connected to source or connected to love, to have more money, to be able to serve, to be able to shift what we believe as a society, as a globe, is valuable. I think we've shown pretty clearly what we think is valuable, and that's ultimately not serving us.
No, it is, because I mean, a lot of people unnecessarily, in my opinion, are afraid of money or afraid to show, to charge for a service and things like that. But as you say, if it's providing value and it's providing service and it's providing that, it's almost you must, because
Yes.
the more you do, then the more you can serve. So it's an upward spiral if done right.
Mhm.
But
Absolutely. And to me, if I'm over here worrying about money, how much of service can I be ultimately? So, and then I think, just to really bolster or bring this point home, it was always a really significant step for me in my growth to say I choose to invest money in myself, also invest time, also invest energy, also invest resources, but that it puts something on the line for us. And I think we're so willing to spend money on the other things that we think will make us happy or whole or complete or finally enough, and that we don't always, or we're getting there, right, to shift our values towards i am I am the greatest investment that I could make, my growth and development. Yeah,
yeah,
so I
and
love
that,
to talk about money.
yeah, it's great. I mean, that's what it's all about. Because it was interesting there. There's an expression, the more you pay, the more you play.
Mm.
And being that, some people have higher financial value of service or financial cost of service seem to have a more successful response. And I'm just curious about that. I don't know why I've gone down this line, but I'm just curious to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that when you it's so tied to the worth and value you believe that you bring.
Mm.
So to me, a lot of times I think what's more valuable than your soul, your well-being, your feeling of fulfillment? So I have absolutely awakened to new levels of personal value in what I offer to folks. And my commitment is always continuous growth, so that as my clients and my students grow, I'm also always growing and learning and reinvesting in myself. That was a recent investment that I made, which is a business coach. And that was, and it is, I'm in a 6-month program with her. And it's such a valuable thing for me to say, you know, I believe 100% in the services and the value that I bring to others. And I probably have something to learn about how to be most effective in sharing that, so that more people can hear about what I have to offer and the perspectives.
Wow, that's great. Oh, thank you. It's I'm curious. I mean, you mentioned earlier on law of attraction.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Sure thing. So there was, I believe it was November of 2016, and I was still a teacher. I was living in Houston at this time, and a lot of people had been talking to me about Colorado. They said, Colorado, you would love Colorado. You love being outside, right? You should check out Colorado. And it got to this point where I felt like this is really a nudge. This is a nudge, and it's what I call nudges. We get little universal, maybe you should go to Colorado. So I had spring break coming up in a couple of months, and I just booked plane tickets to and from Denver for my spring break trip. What I found in the next couple of months is that a dear friend of mine, she said, Anna, you won't believe this. My brother has rented out for a couple of months this gorgeous house in the mountains outside of Denver, Colorado. Would you like to go and stay with me for spring break? Free of charge. And I said, certainly. I am a very broke teacher. I would love to do that for my spring break. So I went with her, and we're climbing up. Her brother had this incredible cabin, very kind of rustic, but the cabin itself at 10,000 feet, snowy mountains all around, just immaculate. And it was myself, my friend, another one of our friends, her brother, and her brother's girlfriend. And they were going to go skiing. And at this time, like I said, I was a full-time teacher, and I was also paying myself through grad school. So I did not exactly have skiing cash on hand. So I said, I'll stay home. I'll spend the day at the cabin. I'll do what I love to do. I'll read. I'll do yoga and just soak up the scenery. And her brother's girlfriend had gotten kind of beat up from the day before snowboarding and was feeling really tired and sore, so she stayed home with me as well. And we started to have a very important conversation, a conversation that would absolutely change the course of my life. And I was talking to her about my move to LA. I said, I'm moving to LA and I'm a little bit nervous because I don't have a place to live yet. I haven't found an apartment. And she said, I just have a feeling that it's going to be really easy for you. And I said, well, I would love for that, but that's not what I hear. I hear it's really hard. I hear that there's all kind of hoops you have to jump through, and it's really expensive and competitive and all these kind of limiting beliefs. So she said, well, you can just manifest it, don't you know? And I said, what's that? She said, let me tell you about the law of attraction. And we dove into one of the most significant conversations of my entire life. She introduced me to Esther Hicks, or the teachings of Abraham, if you've heard of those. All about the law of attraction, about how manifesting works. And really, she told me a story about how she had manifested her perfect house at the time she lived in New Orleans. And it really inspired me. So I went out onto the porch of this cabin. She said, I want you to write down everything that you want in this apartment. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to meditate on it. I want you to envision it. I was, I had been meditating at this point. I had a mindful practice. I had started to read some books that kind of alluded to these things, but not fully. I didn't really understand it. And I saw the apartment that I'm in right now. I saw bright lights coming in. I just felt it was in the perfect place. I saw myself walking down the street, so happy, being in the sunshine. I'm like, the sun has now come out. I felt it. And then I just saw myself surrounded in brilliant white light. And then she said, and then you have to just let it go. You have to just really trust and detach from exactly how that looks and how it might come to you. And boy, how it came to me it's divine. It's really entirely universal. I had planned to live with my cousin who lives out here, and we were looking around at apartments and none of them seemed right, and it was just like I thought it would be. There was all these hoops we had to jump through, and it was very competitive. And I called her and I said, Lindsay, I thought you said this was going to be easy. I thought you said I needed to manifest this and it was done. And she said, I promise you, it will be. When you know it's the right one, you will absolutely know. So one afternoon, we're kind of giving the apartment search a rest, and my cousin says, "Hey, I want to go over to my boyfriend's cousin's apartment. They have a pool. Do you want to go?" Of course, I want to go to the pool. So we go to the pool. I walk into this apartment, and it's beautiful. I think, oh my gosh, so this is what I'm talking about. And her roommate walks downstairs and says, oh, hey, I am a yoga teacher. I hear you're into yoga and teaching yoga. And I thought, what is this? No one thought to tell me, like, resident yoga teacher in this apartment. And as it turned out, that day, that woman, her name is Phoebe, she let the couple that was living here know that the couple wanted to move out, and she said okay, and she asked me to live here with her, and within the month I moved in, and it was just like that. It was the easiest process. It was the perfect place. A yoga studio a couple of months later opened up right around the corner. That was my yoga home that grew me in a million other ways, and it was just completely divine. It was completely divine. It was everything that I asked for, and that was just one of the many moments along my journey that was, I could have never planned that. I could have never mapped that out for myself. I just held my desire. I knew what I wanted and why I wanted it and how it would serve me and others. And I just held the vision and waited for the universe to make some rearrangements.
Wow, what a powerful story. And it's a great example of, as you say, the law of attraction and all the different laws, really. It's...
Yes, lots of universal laws at play. And I think it's, the kind of simplest understanding of it, like attracts like, that was what started to happen, as I became more empowered, as I opened up to my authentic self, I began to magnetize many amazing, beautiful, conscious people that were really authentic. And I think that LA gets a little bit of an unfair reputation, perhaps, for having, people who are maybe fake or inauthentic. And to me, it's entirely dependent on the energy that you're bringing. If you're bringing authentic realness to the table, that's what's going to get served to you. And it's so funny, this apartment ended up being the way that I met my current partner. It connected me to so many people, opportunities. I mean, it's really incredibly divine, and I'm so grateful.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's amazing how these things happen. It really is. Just I'm curious there. I mean, talk to us about and you mentioned it earlier on about spirituality and religion. What
Yeah.
role does that play for you now?
It's so interesting. I I see that I've done this kind of full circle. I feel as spiritual as I ever felt, and I feel no attachment to religion or to dogma, but rather, my parents, as their understanding, I get what they mean when they speak in terms of their religion, and I understand it. And I see that when I meditate and focus energy and do long distance healing, it's the same thing really as when they pray, and when a lot of the things in the Bible that Jesus's actual words and parables, I totally live by and agree with. And I think that's the tricky part, is when we get humanity and fear involved, and control and power involved. um, so I think that I've really found a space where I feel so completely spiritual. I think that we're all spiritual beings awakening to, we're not these bodies, we're not. um, and I think that we just found a lot of different ways to describe it, and that language can trip us up sometimes. And that when we look at it, when we look at the heart of the messages and the core of many of the major religions, there's a lot of common themes of forgiveness, of redemption, of love and connection. I think, of service, of all of these things. So I find that it's a tricky space, and I see so much more in common than I ever have with people, someone like my parents, who I feel they really live what they practice what they preach,
Hmm.
and they really do strive to live by the kind of what I would call Christ consciousness, um, the the essence of Jesus, that is unconditional love, just plain and simple, just that. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. And I'm always curious, especially if you come from a sort of traditionally religious background. And I get that. I think spirituality and religion quite often, I mean, they're sort of extremely close. And as you say, it comes down to language. It comes down to, it's not to say it's the same thing, but sometimes it's similar, but just wrapped in different packaging.
Exactly.
Hmm. But some religions and some people can't always accept other religions. So I was just curious. That was all.
Yeah, I do. I absolutely grapple with that. I think that comes back to the three kinds of business,
Hmm.
it's not it's not my business to tell someone what they need to believe, or how they need to operate. I can, I can share from my authentic space. I can share my story and my personal experience, and hopefully that helps. Hopefully it shines a light. Maybe it resonates. That's what I hope for. And ultimately, people believe what they will believe. We have very deep seated, ingrained beliefs, and it has to do. It's a very interesting cocktail of nature, of nurture, of culture, surroundings, the environments and influences that we have, and what we're exposed to.
Interesting. Nature versus nurture. Where do you sit?
Oh gosh, I think, my studies in education, my studies in psychology, everything will say that it's a combination always. And that, to me, the main aspect of nature is that we are born into the world pure love, just little drops of pure love. And that, of course, we have different, slightly different DNA structure and influences. And I do think that the circumstances, for example, the circumstances under which we are born can impact the lessons and the challenges that we'll face. I thought it was really interesting that you brought this up. You mentioned kind of having a personal shift of your life a couple of years ago around the time that your first child was born. And my story is very similar. My parents will tell that when my mom's on the way to the hospital, it's snowing, there's all this traffic because there was a basketball game that had let out. My parents had just bought a house and my dad had just lost his job. And it was kind of this perfect, literally perfect storm of, oh my gosh, our fourth child, we just bought a house, no income, moving. And I just think it's really interesting how those things can kind of influence the space that we enter the world in. So to me, it's always a combination, and we're not at the mercy of either. We have free will. We have the power to choose. Our destiny is not mapped out for us. And I do believe that we're always being guided, that it's impossible to stray from our path, because our path can take many, many turns. And it doesn't mean that we have the opportunity to choose, and that we're creating our quote perfect path step by step.
Do you are you born with your sort of future inside you as such? I mean, is your path somewhat destined, or
I think that we have we have free will, and we don't have our path laid out, and that we're in constant co-creation with the
Hmm.
universe of what our path, and the collective consciousness of what our path will be. And I do believe that, for example, something I'll say to clients is that it's impossible. There's no wrong decision. You can't make a wrong decision because it's all part of your path because you're choosing it. So to me, in that way, everything unfolds. And that unfolding is a co-creation. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Out of interest, I mean, it's always something that's always intrigued me. But would you say everyone has a fire in their belly?
Oh, I love this question. I do I do think so. Yes. It's the essence of us, right? Our light, our inner light. Everyone has that. And to me, it goes back to the Maya Angelou quote, which is that we have this light that shines from within. There are things that we can do to stoke that fire, of course, but we all have the will, the desire to live. I do
Mm,
believe we all have the intrinsic, natural fire that says, ultimately, I desire to live, and I desire to live well.
mm. I really like that quote, and sort of let nothing condemn the light within. And it's powerful.
Hmm. It
It's
shaped
amazing.
me.
Yeah, I can imagine. Um, I'm just curious, and the event that you talked about in college, and what did that do for you?
Oh man, it gave me freedom. Honestly, I have to look back and I have to say to the people that I believe hurt me, thank you, because it gave me the opportunity to learn and to see a darkness that I didn't want to stay with. And I think sometimes our desire, the fire in our belly, is strongest when we experience contrast and something that we don't want, something that's so painful that we have to find another way. And so ultimately, I'm really grateful. I'm grateful that it happened to me. And it feels bizarre to say sometimes because there was so much pain around it, but the distance and how I have worked through that and the people that have supported me on my journey and the perspective that it allows me to offer in the people that I work with is invaluable. And I wouldn't do any part of it differently. I wouldn't um it and ultimately the greatest gift it gave me was seeing that I can do anything. I can do anything.
That's part. I mean, that sort of term that comes to mind is, to see the light, you have to see the darkness, or vice versa.
Absolutely. I think it's really easy. This is a muddied perception, but
Mm.
sometimes I feel that people can perceive me as what we might call like a positive patsy. I lean towards the positive. I've always been an optimist. And I just like to remind people that my my striving toward to bringing light, enlightenment, right, awakening, awareness, shining a light on the things that we grapple with comes from me shifting out of a very dark space, out of a really really dark space. I was very depressed, very anxious, in a lot of pain. And once again, it was my greatest gift. So I like to remind people that the space that I find myself in now is not always where I have been, and I didn't just come out of the womb some like amazing meditator or Buddha like being.
I was curious. Would you say, do people get you?
Do
Do you
people
feel?
get me?
Yeah. Do you feel like you're understood?
I love this question. I was on a call with a client the other day, and at the end of our call she says to me, she goes, "You're a freak of nature." And she said it in the most loving way, and I felt like that's kind of a compliment because, our world we can get stuck in the mud sometimes. So to me, I feel that I am understood by many people. I think that I have a lot of really strong and beautiful friendships, supportive, close friendships. I have the most incredible, loving partner who probably gets me better than anyone, and that is such a gift. And I think that in my earnest striving to understand others, that people begin to understand me.
No, that's good,
Mhm.
because I mean, because the question I ask a lot of people is saying, do you like yourself and do you love yourself?
I love myself so much. And I used to not, which is how I
Mm.
know that I love myself now. I used to really not love myself. And now it's just the strongest love, knowing that I deserve the absolute best and that it is that love that allows me to serve with unconditional love and meet people where they are.
It's amazing the number of people that can't say that. I find it fascinating.
Whoever you are, call me. We can do some work. It's it's never too late. It's you're never too far gone. You're never too far down the path. I think that it's the most crucial place for us to get to really to be able to love others is to say, I accept myself and love myself fully as I am, warts and all, to quote you,
Mm.
and say, I love myself on every level, physically, mentally, emotionally, on a soul level. I love the unique essence that I bring to this world, and it's of worth and
Well, yeah,
value.
it's talk to us about your intuition.
Oh, my favorite thing to talk about. Intuition is your internal guidance system. We all have it. We all have the ability. I encourage you, if you have stomach problems, to work on strengthening your intuition and see if that helps a little bit. I remember very vividly on my 24th birthday, my friends gifted me a gag gift, a magic 8 ball. And they said, Anna, I hope this will finally help you make some decisions. And I was mortified. I was furious, and not at them. They were just speaking the truth. I was the most indecisive person you would ever meet. It was, I would constantly poll my friends for all of their opinions. Should I go to yoga or should I stay home? Should I watch this show? Do you think I should shower first and do this? What should I text this person? It was incessant. And that experience was so pivotal because that really, talk about stoking the fire in my belly. I said, no, I refuse to be this indecisive person. And so I worked on strengthening my intuition. Little ways at first, just say, okay, what's the first item that you see on a menu? Order that. Trust that. Intuitive eating was definitely a way that I began to strengthen my intuition. What do I really feel in my body would serve me the most right now, right? Not just what am I craving in this moment. To me, the most helpful thing to strengthen intuition that our world is quite bereft of is solitude and silence. Spending time alone, spending time completely silent. Whether you consider that to be meditation or not, it is. So meditate and give yourself a chance to start to learn to distinguish what's that inner critic, inner bully, or lies channel, or ego, and what's really my intuition? What's the voice of truth within me? A lot of people experience it as a feeling, right? You just get that feeling. And a story that I love to tell is a time when, after working on strengthening my intuition, after learning the signs and signals the universe communicates intuitively with me through animals, through the symbols of animals, through numbers, through song lyrics, through sometimes a really high pitched tone in my ear, that are just, like I said, little nudges. And I remember I was going to a party with a previous partner of mine, and he didn't tell me very much about the party. And I had every reason to believe, he would invite me to lots of cool events with connected people all the time, and he was always really supportive. So I had no reason to think that this would be anything but great. So I head to this party. I park outside. He was already there, so I was driving alone. And the second that I park my car, my stomach drops, and I just feel this, and I feel this tightness in my chest, and it feels as though I'm locked in my car, that I can't get out. And this overwhelming anxiety, it just takes over me. And I just hear, near clear as day, do not go in there. And when I get a symbol that's that strong, when I get a message that's strong, this is the piece that people forget about intuition. It's one thing to hear it, it's another thing to listen to it. My logical brain starts to try to rationalize. He's in there waiting for you. He wouldn't bring you to a place that wasn't, good and helpful. I'm sure it's fine. And it was too strong of a feeling that my logical brain, it was really just feeble, feeble defenses. And I called him up. I said, I'm not coming to the party. I'll meet up with you later. Everything's fine. Enjoy yourself. And I pulled around the corner. I drove just about a minute or two away to kind of park and collect myself. I just pull off to the side of the road in this neighborhood, and I look up and I see this huge illuminated peace sign. And I thought, you made the right decision. You listened. And it wasn't until much later that I found out that there was a very insidious political figure at this party who shall remain unnamed. And it's everyone that I knew at the party, which wasn't very many people, but a few people, a few of his friends, said, oh, you could feel the bad energy miles away that this person was bringing to this party. And I had, like I said, I had no idea who was going to be there or even the purpose or anything. So that's just a story that I like to tell to encourage people to really not just attune and strengthen your intuition, but to actually follow it and to listen, because that's really when you start to reap the rewards. And I think we see so many times when we feel like we make a mistake that we got a gut instinct or an intuition and we ignore it and we keep pressing on.
It is amazing how, as you say, and for me, not everyone understands what fire in the belly is as a term. And
Yeah.
I would liken it then to gut instinct and things like that. And people go, or passion, burning desire, passion, gut instinct. They're all bedfellows, as far as I would say.
Yes.
But it's amazing how you pick that up. And just, I mean, out of curiosity, do you see energy? Do you feel energy? How does it look for you?
Absolutely. I think for people it varies, and that's part of, I think some of us naturally we get kind of clairvoyance, little visions, we get images of things. For me, a lot of times it's sound. I get like a little high pitched ringing in my ear, or sometimes it feels like a voice, right? That's saying something. And as when it comes to energy, I absolutely see people's auras. I had a very, very interesting experience recently, for the first time seeing basically a colored light above people's heads. And I was on an airplane, and what I interpret it to be was the color of the dominant chakra that they were in. And on this particular flight, it was a lot of red, which is root chakra, which is fear on one side and security or safety on the other. And a lot of people were kind of stuck in that zone. The root chakra, it's the first, so it has to do with survival, safety, security. So I can absolutely see energy, see auras. I do energy work on folks and move energy. Sometimes it's clearer than others, and I think that is just from practice, heightened sensitivity. I've expanded my awareness a lot and studied a lot as well.
It's quite a transition, and I'm curious, especially when you're sort of saying you were quite sort of keen to learn anyway, whether that's equivalent to academic,
Mm-hmm.
to get to the stage of actually teaching, and then to transform away from that to a different sector. I mean, I'm sure there was a few questions.
You know, I someone who is a teacher, it is a teacher always. And it's a really interesting thing. I remember when I was in my master's program, there was always this discussion about, can you teach someone to be a teacher? And I think that you can teach someone to be a better teacher, certainly, and that not everyone desires that. And just because you're really skilled at something does not mean that you're good at teaching it. That teaching requires a lot of patience. It requires the beginner's mind that I keep coming back to. It also requires a level of empathy as well, and seeking to understand people. So, in that sense, I felt that all of my experience teaching English in a school just honestly prepared me really, really well for all the things that I teach now. And it's similar skill set. It's using your voice. It's connecting with people. It's being committed to your own learning. It's asking great questions is like 95% of it. It feels like it's asking really, really good questions. So there was, of course, I think everyone on their path that's a really bold path has moments when you're like, am I crazy for thinking that this is a thing, or that I can really do this, that I can really, in some senses have it all, that I can be fulfilled and abundant and run my own business and provide, you know, really high service and feel aligned with my purpose and have a partner that supports me and live in a wonderful place and all of these things. And I think we common lie we hear is too good to be true, right? It's too good, or this is as good as it gets. And to me, the better it gets, the better it gets. That's a belief that I have intentionally instilled and thus seen the fruit of in my life. The better my life gets, the better my life gets in every realm. And I'm really grateful for every single teacher that I have and still have, because that's another part of it, is always being a student that has decided to invest in me and share their wisdom.
Wow. Yeah, no, it is so true, and I love that. Just curious, I mean, what is your superpower, and what can you do to help other people? What do you do?
Mm, I love this question. My superpower is helping other people find their superpower. It's shining a light on someone that says, don't you see what's radiating from within you? It's awakening people to their own inner, powerful, endlessly expansive light.
It is such a talent to be able to help people to see that.
Hmm.
I'm just curious, I mean, would you say are you visually biased generally?
Can you ask that in a different way?
Well, just, I mean, I suppose we have different characteristics, whether it be visual, auditory, kinesthetic, etc. And
Mm.
I've noticed a lot of visual language with you.
Ah, it's so funny. I I don't think so. I've always been kind of a words person, and I always studied English and I read a lot and I wrote a lot. And I when it comes to visual and like spatial awareness, I think I have some gaps there. So, but I love words, and I do love to paint pictures with words.
Wow.
I think it's a way that we learn. We learn through stories and we learn through metaphor.
Hmm. I suppose, I mean, that a lot of that will come back to teaching as well, as teaching is a fine art of communication as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I see that all those little pieces along the path led me here to this really wonderful place.
So, out of curiosity, what would be, say, your top values?
I love this question, and this is so much of what I really work on with people is we always, cultivate soul values or core values. And for me, number one is love. I see love is the connection to the divine force that links everyone and everything. And to me, it's meant in each of us to be expressed, to be life-giving, to be overflowing with love. That's number one. And I also, hopefully this is clear too, really value growth. I think that part of our nature as humans is to grow. That what we do is grow, and that it's my commitment to always consistently and sustainably embrace that ever evolving capacity within me, and to inspire that in people around me. Yeah, I think my another one of my values is absolutely authenticity. To me, you got to be real. If you're not real, we don't it doesn't give other people an opportunity to love the real you. Even if they fall in love with you, are they who's the you that they're falling in love with? The facade, is it the walls? That my goal is really to give the people that I serve an opportunity to awaken to their authentic power. Yeah. And the last piece really is integrity, just living in alignment so that my thoughts, my words, my actions are all in alignment. To me, it can do a lot of harm to be out of integrity. No one's ever in integrity perfectly, quote. And to see someone who's talking but not living that can be harmful. And on the other side of the coin, to see someone who is sharing something powerfully and really living that and doing the practices that they share and that they preach is so impactful.
It's amazing, and I think because you said earlier on about almost the power of listening,
Hmm.
and that's, to me, it's amazing, both in terms of the verbal and other forms of communication as well, that listening, the power it has.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's like I said, it's so much of what I do, and I think that people don't get listened to enough by people that are really present.
Mm.
And so what has us, kind of pulling our hair out saying, does anybody hear me? Does anyone understand me? No one listens. And it's like, well, not a lot of not a lot of people are really, really listening. And we've got two ears, one mouth. So we should at least be listening twice as much, huh?
Absolutely. Out of curiosity now, with hindsight, what would you do for your younger self?
Oh, I would just hold her. I would hold her. I would give her a great big hug. I would tell her that you're so loved. I would tell her you're so worthy. I would say trust that inner feeling. I know you get that. I know you get it. Trust it. Listen to it. And love yourself. Love yourself as wholly and completely as you can. And that this is a practice that I do frequently and I do with clients. It's speaking to your inner child, bringing them up to date, letting them be alive and well in your life now, and sharing with them the things that you wish you had heard as a child or as a teen or whatever age.
Amazing. So, what
Mhm.
does the future hold for you then?
Ah, the future, delight. So much delight. To me, my my really main goal is to just continue onward and to continue to share the wisdom that I've been grateful enough to collect, and to keep sharing my gifts and perspectives on a bigger scale. My goal ultimately is to raise the consciousness of the planet and to spread love and to awaken people to their own goodness. So more of that. I hope to just get the chance to continue to speak, to share my story, to to work with folks. I have some group programs that I love to lead, and that will turn into courses, and just sharing all of the goodness that was so generously shared with me. I hope someday that, excuse me, someday I own a retreat center that people can come to, that's out somewhere beautiful in nature, that people can come to host retreats or to heal, have different healing experiences and modalities. I would love to protect nature and to give people the chance to experience the wonder that the natural earth has for us, and the innate healing properties of space and fresh air and beauty. Um, so other than that, the universe knows. Lots of love, uh, some success, some prosperity along the way, more growth, and continuing my relationship with my partner, my absolute soulmate, and building our life together is absolutely in the future.
I love that. That's awesome. So powerful. So tell me, what's your fire in the belly?
My fire in the belly is the the limitless love that links us all.
Well,
That
that's deep and beautiful at the same time. Love it. Love it. So tell us, how can people get in contact with you? What's the best thing and service that you can provide for people?
Well, there's a couple of ways you can link with me on Instagram. My handle is I am Anna, Anna, Cantwell, like Cantwell. And my website is annacantwell.com. You can connect with me there. I do complimentary discovery calls for anyone who is interested in learning more about what I do. If the things that you're grappling with are a match for the services that I offer, like I said, really, I work on the soul level. So it's a multi-pronged approach of mind, body, and spirit. I have a group program coming up here at the end of August. Will be the next round. So in just a little bit, and it's called Mindful Living Mentorship. It's a great way to just integrate some of the very practical and most helpful tools that to me make the biggest difference in living a conscious and mindful life. So really those are the best ways to get in touch with me. Please, I would love to hear if any part of my story, if anything that I shared today resonated or just landed with you. It's so nice to know that. And don't hesitate to reach out. There was so many times along my journey when it just took that kind of bold reaching out, going out on a limb, so to speak. So if that's you, take the plunge.
Love it. So hit us with the website again so people can look up your program.
Sure thing. It's annacantwell.com. Really easy. My name, ANNA Cantwell.com. And I'm most active on Instagram. I also have a Facebook community. So if you find me on Facebook, it's my name too. Uh, my group is Aligned and Soulful Living. So if that's up your alley, would love to have you there. I lead live meditations every week in that group. I also have some meditations on Spotify. All of this, like I said, all of it's my name, so you can just look up Anna Cantwell on Spotify and listen to soothing sleep meditation there, and abundance meditation, and more to come soon, certainly.
Wow, love it. That's the joy of having a slightly unusual surname, that you can get all the, you get all the handles. It's great.
Totally. Yes, it's so true. That, what a blessing. I love
Is,
that.
is there any other Anna Cantwells in the world? Do you know?
I think there are some, but not too many that I've seen. A lot of people mistake it for Cantwell, but yeah, Cantwell is it, and I love that well gets to be in my last name. Living
Love
well.
it. Love it. Anna, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for your
Mm.
time, and thank you for sharing your journey. And I wish you all the best for the future. Look forward to hearing from you again.
Thank you so much, Pete. Thank you for having me. It's been such a joy to chat, and I look forward to hearing more from you soon and your journey.
Thank you, and keep living with fire in the belly. That's what it's all about.
Yes. Thank you so much, Pete.